Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Time Management Tools session number 3. Hi, Nick. I see that you're here, and we're right at 12 o'clock. I'm going to give it a couple minutes. We've got a few other people here, and I just want to make sure we've got one other person, so we'll get started in about 30 seconds to a minute. If anybody's having any difficulties, please feel free to log out and then log back in. I know we had some challenges last week, and I was able to send the link out afterwards. So if that's the case, you'll still have access to the information. So we'll get started in just a minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So this is session number 3, which is time management tools. We're going to pick up where we left off from last week, which is focus on delegation. And then we're also going to talk about some shortcuts and workflow ideas. So greetings to everybody. Thank you for joining today. Quick housekeeping rules for the webinar. There's tabs across the top of your sidebar, and there's tabs there for chat, attendees, polls, and I'd like you to go ahead and type in your name and any comments or questions you might have in the chat bar right now. Sometimes we run on a little bit of a delay on Google's Hangout, so this gives me an idea of what the delay is and if everybody's hearing me okay. So if you can hear me all right, go ahead and type in the chat menu and just say hello. Maybe give me anything in particular you want to learn specific for today so I can make sure that I address that. Do double check, make sure that your speakers are on and not on mute so that you can hear me. And just to let everybody know again that this webinar will be recorded. All right, very good. So let's go ahead and get started. Last week we talked about, the last 2 weeks, we talked about 4 different components. And basically within time management, there's 4 key areas. The first one is prioritizing. The second one is setting your pace. We covered both of those in session 1. And then last week we talked about setting boundaries and managing interruptions and time wasters. That's session 2. And then today we're actually going to talk about delegating and workflow and overall organization. So last week we talked a lot about time wasters and interruptions throughout the day. And I just want to give you a quick recap in order to manage some of your interruptions. First thing is create standards on what you consider a valid interruption. This is actually a really interesting exercise just to consider what's worthy of being an interruption and what isn't. Generally, about 80% of the interruptions are not valid or not crisis oriented. So first thing you want to do is identify what's a valid interruption that you're willing to stop things for, and what are the things that your people have to wait for. The second one is to identify the people who can interrupt you. So for instance, your boss, maybe an important colleague. This can be a strategy that you implement on a daily basis where you let your coworkers know, you let your boss or your secretary know that these are the people that can interrupt me. Other than that, I'm not to be disturbed. And then the other thing you can do is list typical valid interruptions. It's interesting how some people think when they need a question answered and they need attendance, they feel like it's an emergency and it's a crisis. And then in your mind, you're thinking, well, really wasn't a crisis in your book. So you want to spell out for people what a crisis actually is, so that they know what can be an interruption and not. Just because they want a quick question answer doesn't necessarily mean that that's considered a crisis. A couple interesting studies we talked about: when you're interrupted, it takes about 3 minutes to get back focused on what it is that you were handling. I did a little bit more research, and typically each interruption lasts about 7 minutes. So you've got a 7-minute interruption, And then it takes you 3 minutes to get back focused on what you were doing, which is basically 10 minutes for an interruption. And then on average, people deal with about 20 interruptions per day. So it doesn't take rocket scientists to see that that's going to eat up the majority of your day if you don't set the boundaries on setting up those interruptions. If you find yourself, I used to do this a lot. If you find yourself saying, "Oh, I'll do it later on," or "I'll do it in the morning," or "I'll do it on the weekend," when you feel like you've got quiet time, that's a good indicator that you're not setting up the boundaries, and you're very reactive throughout the day if you feel like you need to do it during quiet time. All right, so that was our interruptions at a glance from last week. Today, I want to jump into how to delegate effectively. And let me just say that when we talk about delegation, this is not just necessarily from a manager to a staff member. It can also be a peer member, it can be an assistant, it can even be your boss. Basically, I want you to consider that anytime you need assistance or you want to work as part of a team, these rules of how to delegate effectively are just as applicable. So a couple reasons that we actually want to delegate. We want to focus on the tasks that actually provide the most value. This actually increases employee commitment. We want to divide the work up among team members so that we create efficiency, and it gives us an opportunity to develop our team members. What most people consider is, well, if I don't want to do that task, I don't want to ask somebody else to help me with that, because if I hate it, they probably don't like it either. But the truth of the matter is, given different personalities, what you might not like, somebody else might enjoy. And somebody may not love it, but they might be willing to do it so that they get exposure and they learn a little bit more. So make sure that you're aware that there's key reasons to delegate, and it helps everybody, including yourself. There's a lot of mind trash around delegating that we're going to talk a little bit about today to get y'all focused. When you're delegating, here's how you determine whether or not something is appropriate for delegation. Now, let me just clarify. In order to do a very good job in delegating, you have to be very clear about what you're delegating on the front end, and then you have to have a method to check things on the back end or when the activity is complete. So the way I view delegation is you've got two components: front end, which is the instructions that you provide and how clear you are in your communication about the work that needs to be done is communicated. And then the second component is the back end, which is while the work's being done or while the work is completed, what are you doing to give feedback, to follow up, and to put checks and balances in place? A lot of times when I work with people in delegation, I find that they do one of the two activities very well. But it takes both. If you're very, very good at giving clear instructions at the front end, but you don't follow up on the back end, you'll find that people aren't terribly motivated to continue to do a great job, because nobody's bothering to look or give feedback on how good of a job they're doing. So they'll tend to do the bare minimum. If you actually don't give clear instructions on the front end, but you constantly follow up on the back end and you're giving feedback after feedback, that puts you in a category where you're being seen as a micromanager. So if you feel like you're constantly following up and you have to give feedback and people aren't doing things the way you want them to do it, it's likely because you haven't been given very clear instructions on the front end. So it should be a balance between the two. So here's how to identify what you should actually delegate. First thing you want to do is identify where is your best time spent, meaning what creates the best return on investment for you. That could be in terms of dollar, that could be in terms of productivity, that could be in terms of fulfillment. But you want to be really clear on what are the things that you're best suited to actually do. Take a look at what are your greatest contributions. What is it that you can do that only you can do? Obviously, if it's a special skill set that you have that nobody else has, that's an activity that you're not going to want to delegate. Identify those tasks that best serve your goals, and those should be things that you don't delegate. And then what areas do you enjoy most? So all of the bullets here are the things that you don't want to delegate. Anything that doesn't fall within this list are things that you should actually delegate. A good example is if I consider, and I know not everybody on this call is a business owner, so I'm going to kind of flip back and forth between managing your time as a business owner and managing your time as a staff member. But just as a personal example, I have a home office and I also have a regular office. And there are certain things around the house that I hate doing. Mopping the floors is one of them. And doing the lawn, I've never done the lawn in my life. I've actually mulched once, only once, enough to know that I didn't want to do it again once I did the whole house. The reason I bring that up is those are things that are not in my best interest in terms of my time spent. The amount of time it took me to mulch the house, it actually took me 5 weekends because I did a little bit at a time, which is a good example of breaking things down into bite-sized pieces so that they're more manageable. But in this case, it took me, I did one section of the front of the house, side of the house, back of the house. It took me over 5 weeks. And it took a few hours on a weekend. Same thing with doing the lawn. I could hire a lawn company to do my lawn, and they're literally here for 20 minutes. If I were going to do it, it would take me probably 3 hours, and then I would probably need an hour nap after that. So that would be 4 hours of my time. What I do is I evaluate where is my time best spent. If I'm going to spend 4 hours mowing the lawn and my option is to pay a company, say $60 to do my lawn or $80 to do my lawn, could I make that amount of money within, could I make more than that amount of time within the 4 hours I would be spending doing the lawn? And the question is absolutely yes. So 4 hours of my time is worth a lot more than $60 or $80. Now, the other component is if I loved doing the yard, then it wouldn't necessarily be about money. It would be where I felt I was making a great contribution or I was enjoying it. That has a different fulfillment factor. But generally speaking, if I can get somebody else to do it in a shorter amount of time for a reasonable amount of money, and it's something I don't like doing, I outsource it or delegate it. Thank you so much for the commentary on the mulch story, Frank. I've used that a few times with my clients. I had a little sports car. So the first time I went to mulch the house, I got 4 bags of mulch. And I thought that would suffice for doing the house. That was all that I could fit in my trunk of my little sports car. And when I opened up the first bag and saw it only took up, 1/10 of the bed in the front of the house, I realized I was going to be making many, many more trips to the hardware store. All right, very good. So those are how to identify what should actually be delegated. Here's some mindsets in terms of why people don't like to delegate. They might think to themselves, well, I can just do it myself. Now, and here's the tricky part. A lot of times we don't ask people to help us because the amount of time it would take for us to explain to them how to do it, we could have already gotten it done. And that's a horrible trap for us to get caught into. It definitely does take longer to train somebody, to educate somebody and explain to somebody how to do a task. But if it's a task that you're going to do repeatedly, it's going to save you time in the long run to explain it to somebody else how to do it, give them a little bit of feedback than it is for you to do it repeatedly over however much time. But do make sure, so when you're thinking, well, it's just quicker for me to do it myself, consider how much time you're losing over time because you're repeatedly doing that activity. Another excuse that we use sometimes is it's just easier for me to do it myself. Or I don't trust them. Sometimes we feel like if we give somebody else to do the task at hand, they're not going to do it as well as you would do it. And that actually might be true. You might find that you do it better. But if you want to save time and you want to focus your energies on the most productive things, is it more important to you to be productive or to do a good job in one particular area? If there's one area that isn't as important and it doesn't need to be done perfectly, then that's a good area that can be delegated. So even if it's easier for you to do it, doesn't mean you should be doing it. And if you don't trust other people to do it, then you need to consider if you feel stuck in controlling things too much. If you're controlling activities and you don't want to delegate because you fear that you don't trust people, that's either stemming from ego or insecurity or both. And you're going to need to take a look at that in order to get rid of the mind trash so that you can actually delegate. Consider if you don't trust somebody, instead of thinking about all the reasons why you don't trust the person, think about all the things that could happen for you to trust the person. Meaning, I don't know that they're going to do it right. Then think to yourself, what would have to happen for me to trust that they would get it done right? Now, let me clarify. There are certain people that are just not dependable and not reliable. And I'm not suggesting that you delegate to somebody who you feel is either not accessible or isn't very good with follow through and accountability. I'm saying, you know, that somebody could do a job and you just have to give them the benefit of the doubt. That's a different situation. Then you definitely want to determine what needs to happen to trust them. And if it is somebody that you feel isn't terribly accountable and they're wanting to help you or they're wanting additional responsibilities, then that's a conversation that you want to have in terms of, here's what needs to happen in order for me to feel comfortable delegating things to you. And a lot of times people don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation, so they just don't delegate. And then the last one is, I don't have anyone to delegate to. Even if you don't have a personal assistant or you don't have a staff member, there's all kinds of people that you can delegate to. And this applies to personal situations as well as work situations. Most people would never consider delegating to a boss. But if I had a staff member who was overwhelmed and they said, could you help me with this project so I could focus on that project? And I wanted to be a team player, I would absolutely help out. Delegation doesn't mean that you just dump it on somebody's desk and treat them as if they're less than. Delegation means that you work as a team member and have different people handling different activities. Your spouse, your kids, extended family, co-workers, peers, there's all kinds of people that you can have assist you. We in society have a barrier to asking people for help. And I think of this every time I go to the grocery store, because as soon as I check out at the grocery store and they bag my groceries, they always say, can I help you out to the car? And I always say, out of habit and instinct, without even thinking twice, no, that's okay, I can do it myself. And that actually is my mindset as I go about my day. In everything that I do, I'll do it myself. Or I don't want to bother somebody else. And if we just consider there's all kinds of people available that can actually help us, it's okay to ask for help. And if we can get focused on the things that are more productive and generate more results for us, we'll be happier and more successful as a result of doing that. So make sure that you're clear on what kind of mind blocks you have towards delegation. All right, good. If you guys have any questions and you want to type them in the chat bar, or you have a specific instance, feel free to type a question in there and I'm happy to answer that for you. Here's some particular barriers to delegating. The first one is we're too busy to delegate. If you're at the position where you need to hire somebody or the company is going to hire somebody, at the point that you're overwhelmed is not the time to hire somebody. You want to be proactive, look at particular trends, and if you're beginning to increase in the amount of workload that you have to do, or you have new projects coming in, you want to make sure that you have the time to bring on the right people and explain to them what needs to happen before you're overwhelmed. So if you're too busy to delegate, you're kind of caught in a crunch, and that's going to require some finesse. Sometimes people feel guilty that they're dumping on other people. And as I mentioned, other people might enjoy a change in routine, new activities, learning a new skill set. So it's okay to ask them if that's something they're interested in, and not assume that because you don't like it or because you're busy that they're not going to like it. We talked a little bit about difficulty trusting or depending on other people. Another big one that happens at work is the fear of being dispensable. And I'm actually guilty of this one too. it took me a long time before I realized this, but every time I worked for a company, I always wanted to position myself as being as valuable as possible. So that meant I would work long hours, I would take on more work responsibilities. I was the quintessential overachiever because I felt like I needed to prove my worth on a continual basis. And then when I had the opportunity to delegate to somebody else or have somebody else take over an activity that I was already doing, I would get this twinge in my stomach that what if that person ends up doing it better than me? Or what if that person does it and then they no longer need me in the company? That again is another mindset. Took me a long time to um, feel valuable on my own and not have to continually take on more and more and more to feel valuable. So that's another potential barrier. Let's talk about the areas that you can delegate. So one of the things you're going to want to do with all the activities that we've talked about with time management is really get a sense of what are the activities that you're doing. It's hilarious to me when I work with companies and we lay out a job description, because a part of me knows that what's written in a job description and what the job actually looks like on a day-to-day basis are vastly different. Because it's your role, one of the things that you can do, and I've done this with clients, I did this with myself as well, is I kept a notepad for a solid week. And anytime I did an activity that I felt like I could delegate or I could get somebody else to do, I would jot it down. And I did that for a solid week because, each day is a little different and there's a different focus. And I really wanted to get an exhaustive list of all the different things that I was doing that I didn't need to be doing. And over the course of a week, I actually had on a regular piece of paper, I had a page and a half of activities that I didn't need to be doing. So when you look at that and you keep track of those activities, that will give you clarity of what you can delegate. If you were just to track all the activities that you were doing as a whole, you could go through these topics here and determine whether you could delegate them or not. So if it's something that you do all the time, that's very monotonous and it's a routine, it might be something that you don't even realize takes that much time because it doesn't take much mental power. It's just something you do habitually. That's actually a really good activity to delegate to somebody else, because that means there's already a system in place for it and it's easier to communicate to somebody else on how to do it. If you're not an expert in a particular area and you know somebody else is an expert in a particular area, then delegate that to them. This is another area that I tend to struggle with as well. I like to know a little bit. I like to be an expert in certain areas, but I don't like to be I don't like to feel like I don't have much knowledge in one particular area. So for instance, I don't know much about website. I've spent a lot of time learning about online marketing. And I'm interested in graphic design. So here's how that plays out. If I was going to do branding and I was going to do promotional materials for my company, should I be the one doing the flyer and the logo? The answer is no, that's not my expertise. I should actually be delegating that or outsourcing that to somebody else whose expertise that is, because they can do it better and they can do it in a shorter amount of time. However, the way I determine it in my mind is if it's something I'm interested in, I'm still going to delegate it, but I'll put that on my to-do list for my own personal development because that's an interest area I have. So I actually like doing marketing materials, and I like learning about that. I like the graphics, I like the design, but that's more of a hobby versus me doing it for my business. Third component to delegate is if it's something that you're really unfamiliar with. So I have very limited knowledge in terms of how to do updates for my website. That's something that I completely outsource because I'm not familiar with it at all. If it's something that you don't enjoy, absolutely delegate it. The amount of pressure that mounts, the procrastination around something that you don't enjoy, and the overall heaviness of it is just not worth it. Again, know that if you don't like it, it doesn't mean that somebody else won't like it. What's one person's trash is another person's treasure. If somebody else enjoys it and you could take it or leave it, give them an opportunity to do it. But in order to do that, you have to be clear from them in terms of what they actually enjoy. So ask other people what they like. If you find a job really boring, that's again could be something that's a routine that you can delegate out. And then what you want to do is make sure in any company, even if you're not the managers, make sure people are cross-trained. What you want to do is make sure that when you're out of town, when you're on vacation, you actually have the ability to take a vacation and you're not inundated with people contacting you. So there should be other people that know how to do components of what you do so that you don't have to be present at every waking moment. All right, good. What not to delegate? This is the funny thing, because the things that people want to delegate are actually not the things that you should be delegating. Any type of strategic planning or long range planning clearly doesn't need to be delegated. You can't expect somebody else to lay out plans and foundations for what it is that you want to achieve over the long term. That type of strategic planning, although you can work with other people and you can brainstorm, that needs to be something that you manage. Even setting out your own personal goals and what you want to achieve is something that you need to sit down and do the work with. Another thing that you should not delegate is hiring and selecting people, as well as firing. That happens a lot. I know people hate firing, so they either don't fire and they tend to push people hoping that person will leave, or they get somebody else in the company to do it. The hiring and the firing, if that's your direct report, should be done by you. A lot of people don't like going through the interview process, so they like to bring in other people and have other people handle that. But ultimately, if that's somebody that you're working closely with, that's somebody you're going to want to meet and have a say in on the front end. Couple things in terms of working with a team. You never want to delegate somebody else to be the motivator of the team or the evaluator of the team. If you're managing a team, your goal should actually be to think about how to inspire the team, how to drive the team, how to motivate the team, and then also how to give the team feedback. Sometimes those activities are split, where the person that motivates the team doesn't want to be the person that gives them feedback because they feel like then they're being negative. Or sometimes the people that are giving the feedback don't want to be the inspirational person because then they feel like they're giving mixed messages. But if you're managing a team, you actually want to be responsible for both components, because that gives you far more credibility, and people will take both ends more seriously if you're giving positive feedback, motivating people, and also negative feedback. Any type of sensitive matters, you want to make sure that you're handling those on your own. And then also crises or very important emergent type things, you want to get involved in right away. The way I consider it is, if it's a delicate situation that needs to be handled with a lot of finesse and it needs to be handled in a particular way, I want to be involved just to make sure there's no additional fallout or anything like that. So aside from those few things, which is long range planning, hiring, firing, motivating, evaluating team members, and sensitive matters, everything else is up for the ability to delegate. Here's your 9-point checklist on how to how to determine what to delegate and how to delegate effectively. First thing, make sure you give authority. Is a good example of a company that I work with where they have authority on how they manage the projects, but they do not have authority on if they need materials for a particular project. So if it requires $9, they don't have the authority to make that purchase. And that creates a ton of time lags because now they're waiting for approval for $9. If you want somebody to wholly manage a project, make sure you give them authority for all of the components. Assure that they have all the resources that they need. Provide all the information. This is what we talked about, the front end. Give them all the information. Communicate your objective. A great way to lay out how you want somebody to manage a project is first start with the big picture, which is, here's what I want to achieve, or here's why I'm having you do this activity. When this activity is complete and it's done in this manner, here's what we'll achieve. you always want to give the big picture and the end outcome so that they understand what they're working towards. Then provide accountability, which is letting them know how you'll know they're on track. Don't do that in a mean way, but you can say, we'll have a meeting once a week to touch base on this particular activity. I'll be able to run these reports and see how things are being done. You want to let people know in advance how you're able to follow up with them on the back end. Then you want to give them the feedback, reward their success, give them feedback on whether they've met your expectations, and then give overall acceptance and evaluate the entire process. Here's what this looks like. This doesn't look like you do this once and then you're done. This has to be done for every activity and every project that you're actually going to have somebody do. Once you get into a little bit of a stride so that they know how you are, the communication doesn't have to be quite as crystal clear. But in the beginning, especially if you're working with somebody for the first time or if it's a new activity, you definitely want to make sure you have all these steps. Frank's posing a question here, which is, in terms of rewarding success, how frequent is too frequent? I have an employee who did a great job and I want to reward her, but not in such a way that it's disproportionate to the job she did. Fear about setting precedents and raising expectations. Great question. I don't believe that you can give too much recognition or reward too much. However, I do believe that you can have an imbalance of it. So if you're a lot of times people don't want to appear negative and give negative feedback, so they tend to give only positive feedback. Then it becomes disproportionate. What you want to do is make sure that people know what it is that they're doing well and know what it is that they can be doing better. So if you're going to give feedback, reward success, always give that person praise, but then also identify areas that they can enhance as well. And if it's a little thing that's kind of mundane and you make a huge deal out of it, that's going to seem a little phony. But if it was a huge project, go all out. It's a great way to motivate people. And then what I typically do, especially if it's a newer relationship, I tend to give a lot of praise and a lot of feedback up front. It's kind of like, this is going to sound horrible, but it's kind of like training a dog. In each instance, you have to give the dog a treat if you want the dog to sit down. But then over time, you don't actually have to give the treat. Maybe you give the treat once in a while just to keep that behavior. That allows that stability. So in the beginning, you always want to reward the behavior that you want as frequently as possible. And then taper it out. But don't go so far that you stop giving positive feedback, because I know that's a struggle sometimes too. In the beginning of a relationship or a new work environment, people are crystal clear on what they loved, and then years go by and then you never hear anything. And actually, studies have shown that the majority of people leave their job because of their boss. And the average time it's taken since they felt that they've gotten a compliment from their boss is 9 months. To me, that on a weekly basis, you should be giving positive feedbacks. I've had clients where they had to schedule appointments with themselves, and their staff member could see their calendar. So we kind of did it incognito, and we put a happy face, and that was a reminder for them to give somebody positive feedback. I'm glad that was helpful, Frank, that it was a newer relationship. That's usually when that happens. All right, let's talk about, we're going to shift gears now, talk about some shortcuts and some things that we can be doing with workflow. This I find fascinating, but if you're working on a computer a lot, I'm actually addicted to technology. So I want to give you all some good pointers of things that have helped me in terms of technology that you can be using. These are shortcuts that you can be using while you're on your computer. You want to use Command plus whatever that letter is if you're using a Mac, and then Control plus whatever that letter is if you're using a PC. So if you put Command plus S, if you hit them at the same time, you'll save your document without having to go up to the save bar. Same thing here with print. I do this all the time. When I'm on my Mac, I hit Command Z, which is undo. That saves me a ton of time instead of going up to the tab menu and then clicking undo. So these are some really good shortcuts. Even if you only use a few, I had taken I went to a training actually to learn Photoshop, which I still don't know, but I know how intricate it is. And he was talking about using a Mac, and he gave a lot of examples of shortcuts. And that's where I learned to use Command Z. And I probably use that a dozen times on any given day. And the studies have shown by experts, whoever the experts are, that using a shortcut and not having to go to your mouse pad actually saves a couple of seconds for each time. And over the course of a year, it adds up to 8 work days per year. So it's equivalent to an additional week in vacation time if you can learn some of these shortcuts. N is open a new document. W is to find a word. I didn't know that. I learned that one today. That's to find a word in a document. Sometimes I hit undo, and then you can redo last undo and hit the Y with the command or the control. And select all, obviously, is the A. So if you guys want, if you guys ever want any of these, like if you want the slides and you want me to email these to you, just let me know afterwards so that you have a nice little cheat sheet of this. I was pretty impressed at how pretty this diagram turned out. So if you want to use this, feel free. All right, a couple email tips. First off, know when to use email and when to use the phone. If you have an email that has gone back and forth more than 3 times, it's time to use the phone because now things have gotten too convoluted. And it is true that email saves time over the phone, but only if the email is communicated properly. Miscommunication wastes more time than anything. So know when sometimes it's just easier to use the phone than it is to go back and forth with email. For email tips, set reminders for yourself. I actually I was heavily involved in another organization, in a particular contract, and I would get up at 5 in the morning, and then I would start my day at about 8. And by 8 o'clock, I had to get ready and start heading out the door to go to my appointments. And usually, I mean, once I was gone on appointments, that was it. There wasn't much other time to get other work done. And the reason I got up at 5 is because I had projects that I needed to work on. And what I found was from 5 to 8 every day is how much time I spent on email. It was 3 hours every day. And the studies actually show, and Brad, this is probably higher for you because you said most of yours is email work, but studies show that about 15 hours of a 40-hour work week is dedicated towards email. And once I realized that, I actually did a ton of research on saving time with email. Here's a couple of things that aren't on this list that will help you in terms of managing your inbox and managing your email. For every 3 emails that you send out, you get 2 back. So the lesson in that is don't send emails for the sake of sending emails. Be careful with things like reply all and just sending too many unnecessary emails because you'll get them right back. If you've ever done that and you've sat down and you're like, oh, I'm going to get totally caught up on email. And then you start pounding out all of the emails. And then before you know it, they're all coming right back. It's like a boomerang effect. So make sure that you're crystal clear on the emails that you're sending out, and you're sending out the emails because it's necessary information. So one of the things I do with reminders is if it's a particular activity, or maybe it's an email that I need to attend to, but it's not a quick kind of email, it requires me to do some work, I actually schedule that as an appointment for myself so that I make sure I have the time to actually do that. Track tasks. I am probably going to put together a little cheat sheet for people in terms of how to maximize some of their time with Outlook. Most people aren't, including me, aren't aware of all of the functions that Outlook actually allows. But you can create a task list within Outlook. So what I've done is I have a task list, and it's a task that I label to do. And that's actually where I put my to-do list. But then I also have particular tasks like updates from my website. So that's another task. And in the body of the task list, I put all kinds of information. And sometimes people don't realize that in the body of a task list, or even in the body of an appointment, you can put in a link. You can also put in a link for a document that's on your computer and it will open it. So if you have a meeting, if you put in a link for the meeting agenda, a hyperlink, you don't have to click all the way through and open that document. You can have it stored right there with your appointment. So those are some shortcuts you can actually use on Outlook. Apply rules. These are really easy. If you go to the tools menu and select rules, you can basically set a rule for emails that are incoming and what you want to happen with them. So for instance, I have several articles and resources that I subscribe to, but I don't want them to clutter my email inbox. So under the rules tab, I can put who they're sent by, or even the subject line, or even a keyword. I can specify however I want that rule to be. And then I put it in a particular folder, and the folder I label articles. And so instead of it coming to my inbox, it goes straight into that folder. And then when I have time, I'm able to go in and start reading those articles. I also was in this mastermind group one time, and it wasn't quite a mastermind group, but it was like a group activity, a group project thing. It was more like on personal development. And those people like to send email. And it took me, I don't know, about a week before I got overwhelmed with the volume of their emails and their commentary and what they were doing for the day. It was almost like a Facebook content, but it was coming into my email inbox all the time, and it was driving me nuts. And that's where I learned how to actually set the rules. So none of those were important to me. So basically, any of those people that were in that group, I set a rule that all those emails went into a folder. And then at the end of the day, I could sit down and read their emails, but at least it wasn't distracting for me in the middle of the day. Do use folders on your Outlook. So when you have your inbox, if you right click on inbox, if you have any questions of these, email me and I'll give you step-by-step on how to do it. Right click on your inbox and then put in new folder. Here's what happens though. Setting up folders is almost the same as people that had stacks and stacks of papers. The reason why people don't file paper is they don't understand what the categories should actually be. So the first thing you want to do before you actually set the folders up is identify what are the kinds of emails that you're getting. What are the various categories? So I have personal development. I have articles, FYIs. I have, I'm on a board, so I have a separate folder for that board. And I keep all of those emails in those folders. So first thing you want to do is identify what types of folders you should use, and then literally just drag and drop. Automate your signature, obviously, saves you time in email without having to write out your signature name. Set recurring appointments. A lot of times I see people, if you're meeting with someone on a regular basis, when you go to set an appointment, get in the habit of setting it as a recurring appointment. That way you don't have to spend that time. It takes 10 minutes to go back and forth and banter about when you should actually meet, that takes up a lot of email also. Add color. Color categorize the categories of all your appointments. I did this and I separated all my client activities in green, all my marketing activities in a separate color, and then a host of other ones were in different colors. The reason I did that, green obviously was money for client activities, is that at a week at a glance, I could look if I was on track for meeting the budget of the company based off of the number of green appointments I had. I no longer had to run reports, but if I'm looking at my calendar and there's not much green in there, that's a problem. I also was volunteering in another organization and I color coded that orange. And one time I looked at the week and the whole week was orange. That helped me make decisions on how much time I was designating to other areas as well. Sync your devices. I am a technology addict, I admit it. So I have a PC I now just got the Surface Pro 3. I have a MacBook Pro, a MacBook Air, and I have 2 iPads, 2 iPhones. I don't use them all, obviously. I just don't know what to do with the old ones. And then I have an extra desktop screen. Every single one of my devices, and I know that's crazy. I'm not kidding when I say I'm a technology addict. Every single one of those devices are synced. So I get an email. When I check my email, it's current across all devices. And the moment I delete it, it deletes it from all devices. But my email is set up on Exchange. So if you want to be able to sync things, make sure that you've got things in the cloud to be able to do that, which means it doesn't matter if I'm at an airport. It doesn't matter if I'm in a restaurant, if I'm in my home office, even in my car. I work a lot out of my car. Every device is synced so that I'm completely remote. Have a separate email address. I have an AOL address that's separate from my work email address, so that whenever I'm filling something out, or get a free coupon if you give me your email address, I always put it in the AOL. All my Facebook, social media stuff is redirected towards AOL. And even if you have like a Gmail address for Google Hangouts, I have all of that re-forwarding to my email address. And so once a day or a couple times a day, I might check my AOL account. But that's actually fun because the majority of it's just junk and I go and delete it all. Do make sure you press the delete button. I don't know that people realize that your computer auto archives. So if you delete an email, it's not actually deleted from your system. You can still search for it. And you can actually archive a bunch of emails or keep them in folders. So the object is to get your email inbox completely clean. The other thing I do on a quarterly basis is I schedule unsubscribe times. So I don't know how people find my email address and how I give my email address away so often, but I end up on all these different distribution lists. So on a quarterly basis, I block out a chunk of time. I create a folder that says unsubscribe, and I drag and drop those emails in there. And then on a quarterly basis, I go back to those emails and I spend a half an hour unsubscribing from them. And that saves me a ton of time. It doesn't seem like a lot just to press delete for something you don't want, but it's a distraction that's just not necessary. So those are some email tips to keep a good email inbox. I'm really excited. I just created this acronym today, which I think is super cute, for email communication. First thing you want to do to have effective email communication, and in order to have effective email communication, this is what allows you to be efficient with email and not have a bunch of miscommunication, is we oftentimes respond to email with the intent of what we want to say. We should be putting ourselves in the other person's shoes and considering how they'll be receiving it. So every time you type an email, if you want to be efficient with email, it's not about doing it as quickly as possible. It's about doing it as effectively as possible so that you can minimize the amount of emails you're actually getting. First thing for the Cupid email, C, is consider your tone. We all know that people have either received things differently than what we intended, or we've been on the receiving end of that and questioned how that was received. Spend just a second and make sure that you're clear on how that's coming across to somebody else. I know people say emoticons and all of that are juvenile and you shouldn't use them. I disagree. For me, that's a quick and easy way that if I'm being a little facetious or I'm wanting people to know that it's a good tone, I like to put a smiley face there or something so that people know. This is really funny. I put a Facebook post up last week, and on the Facebook post, the article was about how people, when they've been in a relationship for a really long time, start to look like one another. And there's different reasons for that. So that was the article I posted. And then I said, I wonder if that explains why people start looking like their pets over time as well. And this guy responded to the Facebook post and he said, that explains the bitch face mode or something like that. And I responded like, ouch. And then he thought I took it meaning I had a bitch face. And I was like, no, I understood what you were saying. So that's a good, that was harmless, obviously, but that's a good example of how you never really know how somebody's going to interpret something. U is use bullets and brevity. This is not a War and Peace novel. If you have to scroll 3 times down to read an email, that's not an email, that's a book, that's an article. But what you want to do is break things up into bullets, and make things clear and easy for people to understand. The other thing too is I oftentimes see people that they create this whole story on the front end, and then whatever they need is at the end. And not everybody reads email very well. So put your most important information up front. This is funny. P is proof spelling and grammar. As I was typing that, I spelled it wrong, so I thought I would keep it in there. With autocorrect, sometimes things come across slightly different, but it's also part of your image, how your emails are coming across. So double check things, make sure that the spelling is there and the grammar is there. I, in terms of email, is inquire and answer. Most of the time, email is about getting work done. So it's either about asking a particular question or getting a particular answer. A lot of times I find that I'll send somebody, I did this to you today, Nick, and realized it afterwards. Nick asked me a question on email, and then I responded to him and gave him a totally different response, like, thanks very much, and didn't answer the question. Make sure that you're actually answering the question that people are asking so that you don't have additional communications, and be clear when you're inquiring and you have a question, that you're clear about what it is that you're asking so that people can answer. Otherwise, you go back and forth. Oh, no, I meant this. Oh, I thought you meant this. And that's just a complete waste of time. And then D is have detailed subject lines. I'm horrible at this. It's something I have to constantly focus on. But I might put in my subject line session. That's the worst subject line you could ever put, because if somebody needs to go back and find that, every email they get from me is probably going to have session. Or I might, after a meeting, I might put something like follow-up. You actually want to have really detailed subject lines, like meeting, Friday, October, God, I don't even know what the date is today, October 17th or 18th. That's a good subject line, so that if you're scrolling through a bunch of emails in a search field, you'll be able to identify that one a lot quicker. I do want to mention there's one gentleman that sends emails who does a great job at detailing it, but he puts caps. So he puts like question or answer. And I'm sure he went through an email communication training program where they taught him to do that. But I have to say, being on the receiving end of that, it drives me nuts, because it's like he's shouting at me and I can hear like question or I need an answer. So if you're going to put a detailed subject line with a question, you can do that. Put a question mark. Don't have a run-on sentence in the subject line in caps. That's poor email etiquette. Frank just added a digital signature to his letterhead. Yeah, you don't have to repeatedly insert signatures. That's one of the things I'm going to talk about, Frank, is how to set things up as templates and automate things, because any little thing that you're doing, you'd be surprised at how many times you have to add a signature line or add the address. And if you can automate that, saves you seconds here and there, but that really does add up. So a couple things in terms of leveraging technology to save some time. Outsource as much as you can in terms of general activities that you're doing. If there's technology things that you're not familiar with, get somebody else to help you with that. Another thing that you can do with technology is create templates. So for instance, with my clients, I have what I call an intake packet. And my intake packet is all of the materials that I give to a new client. What I did is I set those all up as a template. I put them all in a folder. And then whenever I would have a new client, I would have that ready to go. Well, actually, what I recently did is I now set all of those up on the cloud, and I put it on a separate folder in OneNote. And so now I'm completely paperless, because all of my intake paperwork is done straight online. So setting up templates and thinking about what are the kind of documents that I use over and over again. Another thing that I do is if it's like a new client, I have my intake packet, which is my documents for me. And then I have client file, which is I give them some background information. And what I do is I print all of those out in advance. I usually have a packet of 10, and I put them in a nice little folder, and I have all of those set up and ready to go at 10 at a time. So instead of me each time I get a new client having to go through that process, I have them all ready to go. And it saves me a ton of time because I'm doing it kind of in bulk. Anything that you can do online, like shopping online, banking online. I remember when I moved from writing checks, I was printing checks from QuickBooks through to my computer, and my assistant kept saying, why don't you just do online banking? And I kept thinking it would just take so much time to set it up. And it really doesn't. It takes minutes, and plus you save so much time, so much money in stamps and everything too. So anything that I can do online, I do online. Do make sure that you have good virus protection and encryptions if you're going to do that kind of stuff online. All right, automate. Anything that you can do as an actual system, if you're doing repeatedly, then automate that particular thing. Consolidate communications. If you're going to return phone calls all at the same time. If you're going to check email all at the same time. When you string that stuff throughout the day, it consumes far more time because you're shifting mindsets. So block off time to chunk out different activities. And then lastly, make sure that you have a really organized workspace. And let me go through with you what the ideal workflow is to give you your biggest bang for your buck. Here's the general outcome of workflow organization. You should be able to sit at your desk to get work done and not have to get up. So literally at my home office, I can sit at my desk. Aside from having to go to the bathroom and maybe get something to drink, I no longer have to get up from my desk. I have everything I need straight at my fingertips. So here's what that looks like. Typically you would have, you always want to make sure you have a pen handy by the phone. The phone, by the way, should be on the left-hand side of your computer screen. The reason being, although it's not as important now if you're using your cell phone, but if it's a desk phone, you don't want the wires to come across the computer and then you get all tangled up and everything. So telephone should be to the left-hand side of the actual computer. If you're into feng shui, plants should be on the right-hand side. That actually helps with creativity and space. File folder should be towards your left. And the way I have my office set up is from where I'm sitting, I can lean over and reach the printer. I also have an outbox file folder. And so I don't do all my filing when I'm sitting there. I put it all in a to be filed bin that is on my desk, and I reach that at the left-hand side of the computer. Obviously, I have my garbage can underneath. I have a pen. Anything that you use on a daily basis should be on top of your desk. So if you use a stapler every day, stapler should be on top of your desk. If you use a hole punch every day, it should be on top of your desk. If you don't use it every day and you use it once a week or less, it should be put away. That keeps a clean, organized workspace. And all of that, even if it's the hole puncher, that should be accessible. You should be able to pull that out of a drawer or a cupboard without you having to get up. Make sure that you've got really good lighting, good support in your chair. If you can have a window is actually good, but you don't really always have control over that. Another thing nowadays is we've got fax machine, we've got scanners, extra paper. Just take a look around at your desk at all the different components and catch yourself over the next little while that when you're working, if you find that you have to get up and down, you're killing so much time and you're creating unbelievable distractions. You should be able to sit down, go through whatever you need to go through, and then get up And sometimes I chunk the activities. If I have to get up, not that you need to know this, but if I need to go get a drink, go to the bathroom, and go and do some filing, I do all that at one time. I don't get up and down, up and down, and up and down. Otherwise, I feel like I'm not getting anything done. All I'm doing is going up and down. So organize your time and make sure that when you're sitting at your desk, you're actually getting work done. A couple things as we talk about technology. These are all the things that we think technology is going to save us time that end up costing us a ton of time. So one of the things that you can do, especially if you've got a new computer or you're downloading new software, is be aware that sometimes there's glitches and that's going to take time. One of the things I do for myself is I create what's called tech time. And tech time is learning time and tinkering time. If it's a new software I want to be able to figure out, if it's some other component, I need to make sure. I realize there's just so much time with figuring out how to do things on my phone. And now there's this new application. That all takes time. So I actually set aside time to do that. And then I don't feel like it's interfering with things. Couple key resources just to wrap up. There's an application called wonderlist.com. I've not used it personally, but a friend of mine actually uses this with her husband, and this allows them to coordinate their calendars with one another and with the kids' schedule. So she can look, if somebody says, do you want to schedule a meeting? Do you want to go out? Blah, blah, blah. She can look at where are the kids, where's her husband at? She has that all on her phone. It's completely synced. It sets reminders. It looked like a really cool application. So if that's something that might help you, feel free to take a look at that. Evernote, I use all the time. I have that on even my phone. Evernote is basically a cloud-based program that allows you to store documents, file documents. And what's really cool is you can search throughout all the documents and it will pull them up. So on being a board member, I'm the VP of finance. So there's a lot of emails that go back and forth in terms of expenditures, reimbursements, upcoming expenses. I don't want to store all of that stuff on my hard drive. I put that all in Evernote. So if I'm not at home, I can pull it up on my phone, resend an email. I've also scanned in all of the documents and put that in Evernote as well. So that volunteer position is also completely paperless. Everything I do all the banking online. I store copies of the insurance policies, you name it. OneNote I just started using, which is super cool. OneNote is through Microsoft, and it allows you, similar to Evernote, to upload things. But because I just bought the Surface, it allows me to write on a PDF document, and it saves the writing on top of the PDF document. So it allows you to attach a document, insert a document, or type right in that. So if you needed to write notes, it looks almost like it's a notepad, but it has all the functions of an actual file folder. And that, again, is synced across all devices. And then another cool tool that I've used is a LiveScribe, which is a pen that records on specific paper. And so if I'm at a training, I will take notes, but I'll also record the session. And if I want to replay it, I can put my pen to the piece of paper at a certain note, and it'll jump to that area. The cool thing about it is at the end of the recording, it automatically uploads to Evernote. So anytime I go to a training, I can take notes, but then it uploads it as a scanned copy of my documents and an actual recording of the training straight to Evernote without me having to do anything. So that's been a nice little handy tool. So those are a couple of my tools. I'm going to create a top 10 resource list for people because there's so much out there that some of it's valuable, some of it's not valuable. I want to thank you all for participating in this webinar series or this session if you were just joining for today. If you want a copy of this webinar afterwards, please let me know and I'll get that to you. I'm going to download them. If you want to purchase the previous sessions. If you weren't able to attend those, you're able to do that as well. Eventually, I'm trying to create a shopping cart on my website. So eventually I'll have that all set up. If there's a particular question, comments, any kind of feedback that would make the webinars better or what you liked about these webinars, please feel free to share that with me. I'm all about improvement. And so thank you for allowing me to go a couple minutes over. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to talking to you all soon. Thank you.